This one's left. Sorry, now that I've embarrassed myself up here. We do have extra copies of this. These are always going to be in draft form. If any of this language is useful to you, please let us know. We have Word versions of it, so that you can take it and use it however you like. The idea of this is for us to help express to agencies what it is we're thinking of. So thanks, and thanks for dealing with the microphone and me up here. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started. Seems like people are still taking a break, but we need to move along so that we can stay on target for lunch and then our field trip. I wanted to be sure and have a panel with some of our Forest Service partners, and talking to Steve and Yerka putting this together. It seemed like they do a lot of work with that agency bureau here, and wanted to feature a success story. And we have been working increasingly closely with Office of Tribal Relations as well. And so I'm going to turn it over to Reed Robinson to talk about something he's really excited to talk about. And then Stephen will join the panel when he comes back in. Thank you, Reed.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Reed Robinson. I'm the director of the Office of Tribal Relations for the USDA Forest Service. First of all, I'm grateful to Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians for providing this venue and this welcome and that beautiful meal last night. I'm also really appreciative of NATHPO for inviting the Forest Service to be here today. And I think this is the third time I've been to a NATHPO conference, and I learn a lot from this group. And it really forms professionally who I am as an employee of the federal government. My primary identity is as a Lakota. I'm a citizen of the Rosebud Sioux tribe, the Sicangu, Lakota Oyate, the Burnt Eye Nation. And those are the virtues that I live by, those virtues that are held by the Lakota Oyate. I'm gonna share with you today something that isn't really novel. It's novel maybe inside a federal bureaucracy, but outside of it, it really isn't. But what I'm going to share with you today is the Forest Service Action Plan on strengthening tribal consultation and nation-nation relationships. This action plan is a result of President Biden's memorandum of January 26, 2021, where he directed all agencies to develop an action plan. This action plan is also the only sub-cabinet action plan as a result of that memorandum. And we hope it can not only move the Forest Service in a good direction, in a better direction, but also provide an example for other federal agencies to raise all boats in meeting our legal, political, moral, and ethical obligations. So if you haven't seen this action plan, you can find it simply by Googling Forest Service Tribal Action Plan. And this is what you're going to see. Of course, what is what is really obvious there is not just the Manti La Salle Mountains, but the Changleshka Wakan, that's sacred hoop. And you've really got to be careful when you use images like that. You got to have integrity behind what you're doing and saying. And I know that, we know that, and our agency is learning that. So within this action plan, it's divided into some 4 major areas, focus areas, which I'm going to share with you. In addition to the Changleshka Wakan, that hoop, and understanding the need to integrate Indigenous knowledge into the federal decision-making process, but also integrating Indigenous knowledge into our perspective and our way of being. So our office, the Office of Tribal Relations in the Forest Service, has taken this Changleshka Wakan and divided ourselves, so to speak, in different witayas. Witayas is Lakota for groups. And so we have a black, red, yellow, and white witaya, each responsible for different areas of responsibility, but we all work together, the 13 of us in the Office of Tribal Relations, using the principles of the Changleshka Wakan, that medicine wheel. And you know what? It's really cool about that. We just brought on 5 new employees in the Office of Tribal Relations. 4 of them come directly from Indian country, not from the federal government. We're not cannibalizing our federal employees. We hired folks from Menominee Nation, Shoshone Bannock, Pueblo of Laguna. And then we have, I would say we have one of the most diverse programs in the Forest Service, representing Indian country. So, as I mentioned, this action plan is responsive to the presidential memorandum. It waterfalls from the USDA action plan. We began development of it in August 2021. We held a tribal forum, June 2022. And the comment period lasted till August 2022. And you know, it's interesting about this action plan, as I said, isn't really novel. We have 130 pages of regulation concerning tribal relations in the Forest Service that was finalized in 2016 through consultation with Indian country, our manual and our handbook. It was finished in 2016. From 2016 and 2020, I believe it sat idle. So we are breathing life into this regulation. That's why we created this. This is a roadmap for the agency. Going forward, here's the 4 focus areas that I'm going to go through today. And you can see these beautiful images on forest units are in different periods of the year. So this is the first section. There's the Chief of the Forest Service and the Undersecretary of Natural Resources and the Environment that is over the Forest Service, meeting with the Standing Rock, Tribal Chairman, Al-Khair last year. And they took a trip in South Dakota, and it was eye-opening for them. So this first section, just some examples. I want to, as you look at this action plan or familiarize yourself with this action plan, this is not aspirational. This is not an aspirational document at all. There are specific actions with specific due dates and groups or programs within the agencies who are responsible for fulfilling those action items. And this is for our internal accountability and external accountability. That's why this plan is published for all the world to see. So here are some components of that. Of course, this is straight out of our regulation, publishing annual reports, not only internally, but to share with you all. Develop consultation protocols with tribal officials, either at the national level or regional or station unit level. Invite you all to participate in interdisciplinary planning teams on forest units and grasslands. You should be able to participate in those NEPA planning groups. Welcome inside before consultation. Expanding communications, if you look at a Forest Service website, you may not see anything related to Indian tribes or Native Americans. That's going to change. Same thing with signage or interpretive displays, visitor centers. You shouldn't be able to go into a visitor center or a Forest Service building and not even see a children's coloring book on Native Americans. Hire a tribal information officers. You all know, working for government, how important, critical these public information officers are. They're kind of like gatekeepers for your leadership. We've already done that. We hired Randy L. Teton, Shoshone Bannock tribal member. Also, you may know her as the model for the Sacagawea golden dollar coin. She started work with us this week. This is really important. So this policy, this 120 pages of policy, which is really cool. I think it's the best out there as far as federal land managers. And it talks about colonialism, it talks about UNDRIP. There's a lot of things in there, but there's some holes in there too, and it's time to update. And so we want to start working with you all to update that policy and bring it forward. And so we'll start consultation very soon. We're going to officially kick off this process in June so we can get it done by next year. And we don't want to get involved in some kind of political issue where, people are too timid because then it's an election year, to sign something that benefits our relationship. So we want to, there's some exigency in this. Fulfilling trust and treaty obligations. This is the local way things are done. These forest plan revisions, these 10, 20-year documents. So we want to make sure you're at the table. There's a section in here on Indigenous knowledge. Sacred sites. I'm sorry I couldn't be here yesterday. I was supposed to be on that White House panel on the sacred sites. I'm the co-lead for the USDA on sacred sites. But when I walked through those doors, as that group was standing up, finished with their presentation, as I mentioned to Doreen and my staff earlier this morning, what I saw was 3 men and a woman. I'm so proud of Doreen for being able to be here and stand in my place. She represented what the Forest Service is all about better than I could. In this plan, if you do a word search, you'll see that sacred sites is mentioned 30 times. If you take away the pictures, it's really only 10 pages, you know, in the glossary. But sacred sites is mentioned in there 30 times. You know, we're not just about Section 106 in NAGPRA. We need to work with Indian country as contemporaries that brings in all our relatives, the grandfathers, those rocks, the winged ones, four-legged, two-legged, you know what I'm talking about, air, water, and also doing business with Indian country. I'm here to tell you right now, and I'll get into it a little bit later, that the Forest Service is open for business to Indian country in a very serious way. It was regarding, you may be familiar with the joint secretarial order between the USDA and the DOI, and now being joined by Commerce. Section 6, it talks a lot about implementation and accountability. One of those wheatayas I talked about, that red wheataya, we stood up a separate section within the Office of Tribal Relations just to focus, the team to focus on co-stewardship and flex out and utilize all of our authorities. Tribal Forest Protection Act, 638, Native Act, Good Neighbor Authority, and fund those programs proportionately. You know, we're going to have consultation March 28th or February 28th, March 1st on the emergency declaration, but also the Inflation Reduction Act, 120-day consultation period on that. We have like $4 billion of funding there. And this Inflation Reduction Act isn't necessarily for the external boundaries of the Forest Service. This is for external. This is tribal, state, private lands. And, you know, I'll be transparent with you. The Forest Service is having a hard time getting all this money out. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of work. And so the Forest Service is building the infrastructure to do just that. We're also concerned about the recipients of this money and the need for capacity and technical assistance to receive this money and to implement the projects that are important to you and your nations. So in addition to funding that we want to use to get into, for instance, 638 agreements with tribes, we're also looking to fund tribal NGOs and tribal-owned businesses, 8A contractors and whatnot. And, you know, some of your tribes have an economic arm as well that could be recipient of this kind of funding. You know, in this IRA Act, there's $450 million for landscape scale restoration for states, tribes, and NGOs. Go for that money. And if you need any help, we're here to help. We're standing up resources to help you. Please also attend the consultation. Share with your leadership that this consultation is coming up soon. Just covered that. You know, some of this stuff is like, hey, like, why would we have something like that there? Well, we want to make sure that we're involved in the conversations when we're providing technical assistance to Congress, that we're echoing and reinforcing what we've heard through consultation repeatedly. And we got the Farm Bill coming up. There's opportunity there to do things like decouple 638 from the Tribal Forest Protection Act, allowing more tribes to do business with the Forest Service, not just tribes that border the Forest Service. I've heard we share 3,000 miles of border with tribal nations. We have funding to engage youth, starting off with just $5 million in one program, and there's more money where that came from. Working with the DOI and implementing the Indian Youth Service Guidelines. Working across agencies, interagency working groups, working with inside the USDA and the Native American working groups, creating cohorts of allies to work on issues that are important to Indian country. I heard there was a lot of discussion on training. You know, we were asked by the department in 2013, actually ordered by the department in 2013 to create a 3-tiered training program. We're just now doing that. It's going to be done this year. So if you look in that regulation, there's a section there called responsibility inside our manual. And it's A through N, from the chief down to grasslands liaison. These are all decision makers that impact our relationship and our responsibilities. Every single one of them, including every single person, rank and file in the Forest Service, will receive training in different tiers. We heard during consultation that there's a lot of collateral duty liaisons out there. So somebody walking down the hallway, hey, you're the tribal liaison, or you're an archaeologist, you're going to be the tribal liaison, or you're the blah, 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 you're going to be the tribal liaison for the unit. That's over with. If you're going to be a tribal liaison for a federal unit, you're going to be trained and certified. And it's going to be in your performance standards and your position description. It's just not a 20% duties as other than assigned. All these decision makers, district rangers, forest supervisors, regional foresters, deputy chief, associate deputy chiefs, whatever, they will all be required to have training before they can consult. Another novel thing, whoever heard of an organization doesn't hold their people accountable. So first of all, when you have an organization, large or small, private sector, NGO, federal, and you have a legal and political responsibility, a trust responsibility to uphold based upon things like the Constitution, Supreme Court decisions. How is there no accountability? How is there a loophole when you can go from a GS3 to an SES and not be accountable for those things? That's changing as well. Each one of these individuals will have performance measures developed this year with my office and human resources to develop measures for accountability, professional measures and performance accountability. We started this last year with some of the SES in the Forest Service, and they get it. They're starting to get it. And so the SESs this year again will have performance measures related to co-stewardship and several other discrete items. Last year, it was to familiarize yourself with this policy, it's 130 pages of policy, and implement it. By 2024, fiscal year 2024, it's going to be for thousands of employees. We had a naming ceremony. If you look up and say, look in the Forest Service, there's an article that came out in Forest Service Leadership Corner, where the deputy chief of was what used to be state private forestry, state and private forestry, has changed its name to state, private, and tribal forestry. So Indian country is at the leadership table, and you have to honor that name. You know what names are important to us. You can't just have a name and give a name. It has meaning and it has responsibility. And we're helping Deputy Chief Jaelith Hall Rivera see that, understand that, and she's taken on that role in a really good way. So if you get a chance, read that article in the Forest Service, inside the Forest Service Leadership Corner. We want to make sure everybody has the correct staffing. As I said, one of the things I noticed when I started with the Forest Service is they got in that organization. This organization has incredible infrastructure in that we have policy where a lot of agencies don't, but they also have positions at the Washington regional forest grassland level, but now also in research stations. We're hiring, and we're hiring from Indian country. We figured out how to do that thanks to the department's Office of Tribal Relations in issuing and hiring advisory for all USDA agencies. So we're looking for the professionals that we need in order to carry out this mission. We're looking outward into Indian country. So please, if you're interested in that, or you know people that may be interested in this kind of work, we've created space for you and a way to get in if you want in. All this bipartisan infrastructure legislation money and IRA money and our regular appropriation. The only our database of record is our USDA consultation reporting database. And we want to make sure that all this consultation is being loaded up there. Now, keep in mind, there's nothing in there that needs to be protected or like sacred sites identification. Nothing in there is sensitive per se. And consultation records are to be maintained in a perpetuity, but this is our database of record. But the thing is, it's all we got. So all this money, all this data that we need for equity and equity spending, we can't tell a story now, and we can't tell a story tomorrow, despite the billions of dollars that we have right now, on how specifically we are investing or planning to invest in Indian country. That's going to change. We're going to create and make sure that we have that data. So when you ask us, like, what'd you do with all that money? We consulted with you on that last year. That bill consultation was last year. Billions of dollars. What did we spend it on? I can't tell you. But in the next couple of months, I better have a story to tell. Same thing with the IRA. This consultation we're coming up. If that money is not as specific as in the bill, the bipartisan infrastructure law, there's specific sections in the bipartisan infrastructure law that calls out, for instance, $160 million for states and tribes for Good Neighbor Authority and Tribal Forest Protection Act. Okay, first of all, how do you determine the split? I need to be able to tell that story. We need to be able to tell that story. Like, what, did 80 million go to tribes and 80 to states? Or is it $1 million to tribes and the rest went to states? We need to be able to explain that. Now with the IRA, it's not a specific, doesn't have sections in there. So there's money that Indian country can identify for your needs, and we really need to hear what those needs are. And we were good at that external outreach. And so when I mentioned the name change of the deputy area, state, private, and tribal forestry, that work is for cross-boundary work. The other side of the so-called green boundary, whatever it is, outside the Forest Service units. So we want to deliver to you, whether it's in forest health protection, landscape scale restoration, got greenhouses. We need to, get, if you go up on the Hisaba, the Black Hills, my experience before I got in the Forest Service, just anecdotally noticing, I was understanding what the Park Service was about after being 30 years. And my concept of the Forest Service was trees and cows. That's not what those landscapes are supposed to look like. Trees or lack of trees and a bunch of cows. That ground is sacred, but it's devoid of so many things that are missing. So your tribe or other tribes may want to ensure that those medicines and those plants and those animals are there on those forest units and grasslands. There's we developed an advisory commission to help us make sure that leadership, these are senior leaders within the agency that are supposed to carry this message and to make sure it goes deep within the agency. And they can help us with the update. If there's any internal issues about updating this action plan, they can help us make sure that it's fair. So as I said, this is an interesting plan. It shouldn't be groundbreaking. It really shouldn't. Because what it is, again, there's really three things it's all about. It's implementing and executing our policy and everything else. Law, statutes, treaties, the Constitution, you name it. Canons of construction. And this administration has provided a lot of orders and directions and memos about consultation, sacred sites, indigenous knowledge. And then, as I mentioned, it's not all about that mazaska, that money, but there's money available. So many people don't understand about this invisible minority of Indian country, a little more than 1% of the population. And so we need to make sure that internally, we are holding ourselves accountable, and externally, you and your tribes are holding us accountable because we're your servants. And so it's a roadmap, combining all those things because there's just so much to do. And so, honestly, it's a gift. It's a gift to the agency. And the agency is receiving this gift. It's not a self-gratification, but it is really just a roadmap. We talk about the red road and that red path. That's the hardest road, that's the hardest path. But the work, this is not extra work for the Forest Service. This work has always been there. We're just like, it's right here, do it. We're closing the loop. So I just want to say Wopila, Pilamae. And we have another presenter, and me and my staff, Sandy Marin, and over here, who's been with been with this plan from the beginning. And Doreen at the Ball Gatewood is here. I'll be here to answer any questions. I got some postcards. I got a couple business cards. But I want to make sure that that we're honestly trying to do a better job, much better job. Thank you. I'm gonna hand it over to Melissa. And I just want to say, Kola, you're not Lexi yet, you're my, but I learned a lot from you. I just want to give you this tobacco. This is natural tobacco that came from the Land Between the Lakes, the Forest Service unit. And I just want to say, Wopila, not only for what you taught me, and many, many temples have taught me, but also for that song last night. So, Wopila, Melissa.
Made sure I have the right button. So, hi, everyone. I want to thank the staff of the Tribal Historic Preservation Office of the Eastern Band of Cherokee for inviting me to come and talk with you about some of the work that we've been doing together to address an adverse impact and ensure the future protection of an important Native American sacred site and a National Historic Trail. So here's a map that shows the locations of the national forests in the southern region. And welcome to the southern region. El Yunque, which is in Puerto Rico, is not on this map for obvious reasons, but you're all welcome to visit there as well. So the national forest lands are shown in dark green, and this may be useful information for you later. So my official role is that of coordinating the implementation of a Section 106 Memorandum of Agreement concerning a segment of the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail just across the state line in Monroe County, Tennessee. It's on the Cherokee National Forest. I want to very clearly state that I am not the administrator or coordinator for the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail. The Trail of Tears is administered by the National Park Service National Trails Office in Santa Fe, New Mexico. However, a few hundred miles of the trail are located on national forest lands in both the southern and eastern regions. It's regions 8 and 9. The area this presentation focuses on is here, back in the homelands. So I'm not here to talk about the history or events leading to the forced deportations of tens of thousands of indigenous people from their property and homelands in the southeastern United States. Many of you and your fellow tribal nation citizens, seasoned researchers, many of whom are connected with the National Trail of Tears Association, can give detailed, heartbreaking, enraging, as well as hopeful and inspiring presentations about that. The 1830s Indian removal was well documented at the time by the U.S. government. So events that occurred here in this tiny little parcel of land in 2014 and 2015, resulting in damage to a 1-mile section of the trail, and the extensive tribal consultation and collaboration that ensued are the focus of what I'm going to talk about. So in early 2016, when several of the consulting tribes notified us that they considered the Trail of Tears and Unicoi Turnpike to be a sacred site, our regional forester put in place a protocol for more thorough tribal consultation on projects and activities on national forest lands proposed within 1/2 mile either side of this trail in the southern region. And that protocol remains in place today. Over the course of addressing this incident, the Forest Service hosted 7 face-to-face government tribal consultation meetings. And given the nature of this incident, our regional forester personally and fully participated in these face-to-face meetings. These meetings took place both in Oklahoma and in Eastern Tennessee, and were usually attended by representatives from the TIPO's offices from 7 to 8 of the 10 federally recognized tribes that we initially consulted with regarding the incident. The Forest Service covered all the travel and the meeting expenses. So early on, the tribal representatives asked us to conduct several kinds of assessments of the damaged section of trail and its surrounding area, which were performed with the assistance of TIPO personnel from the Eastern Band of Cherokee, United Keetoowah Band of Cherokee, and Muskogee Creek Nation at the time. In addition to providing staff to assist with the field work for these assessments, the TIPOs for the consulting tribes and the SHPO for Tennessee were provided these reports resulting from the assessments for review and comment. There were several verbal apologies from agency leaders, including verbal and written apologies to tribal leaders from the Secretary of Agriculture. The consulting tribes and Forest Service jointly arranged for an apology resolution ceremony at the 2017 Bridging the Gap meeting, which was hosted by Cherokee Nation in Catoosa, Oklahoma. In December of 2018, the damaged portion of the Trail of Tears was determined formally eligible for inclusion in the National Register of Historic Places under criterion A and D, and with significance to the tribes as a traditional cultural property by the keeper of the National Register. So after all the assessments, meetings, and negotiations, the MOA was executed on December 10th of 2019. It was signed by 17 entities, including 7 federally recognized tribal nations. So the tribal nations that were signatories to this agreement included Cherokee Nation, United Keetoowah Band of Cherokee, Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians, the Muskogee Creek Nation, Alabama Quasarty Tribal Town, Coushatta Tribe of Louisiana, Flaplaco Tribal Town. And in addition to the SHPO, the Council, the Park Service, National Trail of Tears Association, and several other entities. So these are the key stipulations from that MOA. And we're going to look at our progress to date. So again, the MOA received its final ratifying signature from the Advisory Council on December 10th of 2019. A pandemic was not a thought in much of anyone's mind at that time. So earlier, we'd been given a 2-week window of availability from our Forest Service Trails Enterprise team that they were available on January 29th of 2020. There was a lot that had to happen before the Trails Enterprise team could start their work. However, because of our strong internal and external relationships and working with our grants and agreements and procurement staff, and how important everyone in our region knew that this project was, we succeeded in pulling the agreements and tribal contracts together to start work the next month. So on January 7th, archaeologists from Western Carolina University, just down the road, assisted by employees and citizens from all 3 of the federally recognized Cherokee tribes. That's Cherokee Nation, Eastern Band of Cherokee and the United Kituwa Band of Cherokee spent 3 weeks in January of 2020 assisting with the archaeological support phase of the project. One of the tribal nations had a specific ask of us. Having visited the damaged trail area several times over 3 years, we all observed the ponds of water that accumulated in the damaged portion of the trail and the clusters of amphibian eggs that regularly occupied these ponds. The representative for that tribal nation stated that there had already been enough suffering on that trail and we did not need to add to it by deliberately destroying more life forms in our efforts to remediate it. So we gathered and removed 36 gallons of amphibian eggs and relocated them to 2 actual ponds outside of the project area. Everyone agreed that was the hardest part of this project physically. The construction portions of the trail remediation project were implemented in accordance with the trail remediation plan in the MOA. Bo Carroll, who's an archaeologist and Eastern Band of Cherokee Indian citizen, was always on the site. He stayed with a small backhoe operator and was on call when a couple of questions arose. Volunteers and 2 members of the United Kituwa Band of Cherokee's Public Land Corps worked together to compact the soil, roll out erosion control blankets over the exposed areas, stake out straw wattles and straw bales, scatter native plant seed, and help assemble a split rail fence that was placed in the TVA power line corridor that crosses the trail. Our youngest volunteer was 17 years old and our oldest was 80. The total number of volunteers was limited to 8 people per day, and I had to turn a lot of people away. So we completed the trail remediation portion of the project in 6 days, several days ahead of schedule. So this is an image from early February 2020, these photographs. And this is what the area looks like now. And I took these photos in December. We set up a monthly monitoring protocol for the first most critical 2 years after the remediation and stabilization. Local volunteers helped us with that, submitting monitoring forms and photographs during the pandemic. And Bo Carroll from the Eastern Band also did a couple of monitoring visits to the site. The erosion control devices are temporary and designed to melt into the landscape as the area stabilizes. There are places where we'll need to periodically replace the devices and reseed with native plant seed until more vegetation takes hold on the trail bed. And our local Forest Service law enforcement officer walks this trail every weekend and sends me a report. So next, in order to protect something, first, you really need to know where it is. The existing Park Service data layer for the Trail of Tears, particularly the new section here back east that reach into the Cherokee homelands, is somewhat generic and broad brushed in many places. We needed more precision to help avoid future mishaps. So that's when we partnered with Dr. Brett Riggs at the Center for Cherokee Studies at Western Carolina University. Dr. Riggs has been researching and documenting the Trail of Tears and other important Cherokee historic sites for the National Trail of Tears Association for more than 30 years. Western Carolina found that in 1837, the U.S. government commissioned the U.S. military to conduct a detailed survey of roads and trails in Western North Carolina to plan for the Cherokee deportations. So combining all this information with other archival materials and field verification, we now have a more accurate map of the original trail. So under our partnership agreements, Western Carolina completed the archival research and GPS and photo documentation of the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail in North Carolina, the Unicoi Turnpike in northern Georgia, and this past summer completed similar work for the Trail of Tears and Unicoi Turnpike in eastern Tennessee. Members of the Eastern Band of Cherokee assisted with the field work for this project. This data is critical to our ongoing efforts to protect the trail and surrounding areas. For example, the Forest Service has incorporated this information into our Wildland Fire Decision Support System, WFDS. This information, along with a fire suppression planning and operations guide for the Trail of Tears, has successfully been used several times in North Carolina, even in 2016 during the severe wildfires that took out part of Gatlinburg. And it helps prevent the incursion of heavy wildland fire suppression equipment in proximity to the trail. So another item, identification, interpretation, and long-term management. So in September of 2019, we hosted a Trail of Tears learning exchange on the Nantahala National Forest here in North Carolina. And it's just very close to where we are now. We toured and talked about some of the intact original sections of the trail. And several Forest Service personnel talked about and demonstrated tools and techniques that could be used for trail maintenance and stabilization, managing for culturally significant tree species, addressing non-native plants such as kudzu, which you'll see everywhere around here, and the use of prescribed fire. The U.S. Forest Service and the consulting tribes also developed draft language for a forest plan management area for the Trail of Tears National Historic Trail. This was incorporated into the recent forest plan revision for the Nantahala and Pisgah National Forests here in North Carolina. We will be amending the forest plans for the Cherokee National Forest in Tennessee, the Chattahoochee National Forest in North Georgia, Land Between the Lakes National Recreation Area, and the Ozark St. Francis National Forest in Arkansas to include this management area designation of the trail corridor. This designation includes lists of objectives, standards, and guidelines to follow, including highlighting the requirement for tribal consultation and frequent tribal consultation when considering actions in the corridor. So here's the United Kituwa Band of Cherokee Public Land Corps doing some brushing along an original section of the Trail of Tears and Unicoi Turnpike on the Cherokee National Forest in eastern Tennessee. This is from 2019, but they also returned in 2021 and 2022, and we're looking forward to 2023. For several of these young people, this was the first time they'd been outside of Oklahoma. On the weekends, the Forest Service staff took them to see different cultural sites in the area, such as the Sequoia Birthplace Museum, Judicula Rock, Klingman's Dome, and the Eastern Band of Cherokee's Museum of the Cherokee Indian. One weekend, family members for the UKB Public Land Corps came to visit from Oklahoma. We walked a 5-mile section of the original Trail of Tears to the Fort Armistead site. And we were there exactly 181 years to the day that some of their ancestors had been there. And this is just one example. Our region has partnered with several federally recognized tribes to create public land corps and other resource crews. The Alabama Coushatta Tribe of Texas, Gina Band of Choctaw, the Coushatta Tribe of Louisiana, just to name a couple. We've also been able to provide Native Act funding to federally recognized tribes for ancestral homelands tribal tourism efforts, so that the tribes can bring their own people. They can be tourists and come back into their ancestral homelands for visits. So this is what the archaeological artifact curation space at Western Carolina University looks like now. And again, Western Carolina is just down the road from here. The Forest Service funded the renovation for their curation facility. Proper care of archaeological materials and associated documents is critical. So Western Carolina worked with the Eastern Band of Cherokee, some officials of which are on the university's board of directors and the tribal council, to name the facility after the ancient Cherokee town on which Western Carolina University was constructed. And we talked a little bit about Fort Armistead earlier. Fort Armistead is an archaeological site on the Cherokee National Forest on the Trail of Tears. It was a U.S. military installation constructed in 1830 to keep gold rushers out of Cherokee Nation. Then it was used as a stopover for the deportation of a few hundred Creek refugees of the Creek Wars in 1837. And then the forced deportation of Cherokee citizens from their homelands in 1838. On May 11th of 2022, after years of research, study, minimal excavation, dozens of field visits, rewrites, and tribal consultation on the text of the nomination, the Forest Service presented its nomination to the National Park Service National Historic Landmarks Review Committee, and the nomination was unanimously approved to be forwarded for signature. Unanimous approval on the first try rarely happens. So in addition to our primary investigator and partner, Dr. Brett Riggs at Western Carolina, supporting live testimony was also provided by Jack Baker, who is the president of the Trail of Tears Association and a Cherokee Nation citizen, and Elizabeth Toombs, the TIPO for the Cherokee Nation. We received letters of support for the nomination from the other signatory tribes and consulting parties to our MOA. So what's next? We have been working with the Tribal Historic Preservation Officers on developing the employee training. We're looking at place-based training. And we're going to try to pilot that on the Cherokee National Forest in the next few months, and hope to reach out and have a similar training on other forests. That would involve bringing in the TIPOs and tribal representatives to help us craft, them tell the story that they would like to tell. So that's something, and we're going to talk about this at the Bridging the Gap meeting coming up. We're also working on a lessons learned product or products, and we've partnered with Middle Tennessee State University recently to help us with that. So I'm going to stop here, and if you've got any questions for Reed or myself, we'll be happy to answer.
There we go. Okay, lunchtime, and I have a few announcements for you. Thank you so much, Reed and Melissa. We really appreciate that. And thank you for all that you do. And I encourage you to find them and continue discussion and ask them questions as you're able to. Over lunch, we're going to show a video for you, one that we had hoped to show yesterday, and that's going to be about 23 minutes long. So as soon as you go ahead and line up for food, then we're going to start showing that, because the buses for the field trip will be leaving at 1 o'clock. So we need to continue to sort of expedite today. A note about that, it's going to be a gravel path when we get out there, and you can walk as little or as much as you want to, but we do encourage you to consider putting on comfortable shoes that you hopefully brought. And when we get out there, our hosts are going to tell us anything we need to know about protocols related to photos and things like that. If you're not going, reminder that Sheila Bird is continuing to record interviews for TIPO Talk in the conference room out here, and we hope that you will stop by and talk to her about that. Dinner tonight is on your own, so please explore the property or elsewhere if you have a car. Certainly lots of restaurants here. And a very exciting announcement, we will have crafters. We weren't sure about that, but there will be some tables. There's tables that have been set up out here. And after those good folks finish their day jobs and before the movie night, we will have some things for you to browse and purchase. And we're really excited about that. 8 o'clock back in here, we're going to have movie night with a series of short films selected by the museum that you can read about in your program. And right now I'm going to turn it over to our member, Mr. David Frank, to bless our food. And please remember to let your elders go first in the line.
Ko Magadi, Istongo Folotska. I'm David Frank. I'm the TIPO with Laplaco Tribal Town. And I want to take this opportunity personally thank the NATHPO organizers for all their hard work in putting this event together, and also all of our presenters for their knowledge and all their efforts. We really appreciate that. This is special to me to be on the homeland of the Cherokee people because my daughter is enrolled in the Cherokee Nation of Oklahoma. And I myself am a Muskogee person, and I participate in a lot of those ceremonials back home with the Cherokee and Katua people. So I'm humbled to be able to give this prayer for you at this moment in time. Potkiho ilagitska, Chiho chifkat, ajagigas, Chimomikidat, alagigas, Memaho inagi komitski. Moma ida bomen, yama igana o momigas. Nitta athaga taklegen, moja nittan pomas. Momas pom awitlan is pom wegas. Owitlejayat is imwigagiat ida bomen. Nagipune ot kipwijidai is kitlida o ayiskas. Momes howaga asipusages. Omikida, yikchida. Moment lakida, Chinagi, Imunga, Omega. Amen. Umbox J, everybody.
Thank you all so much.
Greetings, my fellow Tiponians, and greetings, National Association of Tipos, and to everybody that is there in Cherokee Nation. I'm sorry that I'm not available to be joining you in February for the National Association of Tipos conference. It's really great to know that it's finally back in person. I am not able to attend because here in the state of Nevada, we have some of our sacred places that are on death row. And it's very important that I share this information with you and why I'm not able to be with you guys today. So I appreciate that. My name is Mashawn Eben. I'm a member of the Reno Sparks Indian Colony. My father's people are from the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe, and my mother's people are from the Death Valley Timbisha Shoshone tribe. I manage the Cultural Resource Program, and I'm the Tribal Historic Preservation Officer for the Reno Sparks Indian Colony. The Reno Sparks Indian Colony is located in Reno, Nevada. We are comprised of Washoe, Paiute, and Shoshone people. And I want to talk a little bit about with you the plight that we're going through. So I want to give you a little background first and foremost. We are the Washoe, Paiute, and Shoshone people. This is the state of Nevada. We do not recognize fences, lines, and boundaries, although that's what is shown here. We have many bands, Paiute bands, Shoshone bands, and of course our Southern Shoshone bands and the Washoe people here too. But we were all interrelated and had bands and different types of Paiute bands as the Paiute Nation. And as you know, the federal government put us all on reservations and individualized us. Today, our plight that we are fighting is against lithium mining that's coming to the our state homelands of Nevada. And our Nevada homelands are becoming a sacrifice zone for this new so-called electric vehicles. So I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit about that and why we're fighting so hard to protect our sacred areas. We are recording right now in our small exhibit at our cultural resource program in our TIPO office here in Reno, Nevada. We have a small exhibit that we worked with the WM Keck Earth Mining and Engineering Museum from the University of Nevada, Reno. Our exhibit is called Wounded Souls, Extracting from the Land and Our Spirits. It's an exhibit on the effects of mining. I'm not going to take you through the exhibit, but it is a powerful exhibit. It's getting a lot of move. We've had hundreds and hundreds of people coming through. We have a lot of dignitaries coming through. People are watching. The world is watching what's happening here in Nevada because of lithium mining. So I'm going to walk you through really fast, and we're going to go to the section of Protect Pihimaha, our sacred space of what we're trying to protect, an important traditional cultural property of the Reno-Sparks Indian Colony, of all the tribes of Nevada. What's very important for us to save, and why I told you our homelands are being sacrificed, and not only our homelands, the habitat for important species, and also our earth is going to be, that's why I said our earth is up on death row, and we need to fight hard to protect what is ours, because it's happening in our country. It's going to start coming to your country as well. We want to show you a little bit of part of why we're fighting so hard over here against Lithium Nevada Corporation, who's coming to sacrifice our Nevada homelands. We are here to talk about Protect Pihimaha, Thacker Pass. Thacker Pass project was brought about a couple years ago, several years ago, and during the heat of COVID, the Bureau of Land Management, Winnemucca Office District, started the NEPA process, the National Environmental Policy Act process. And during that process was in the heat of COVID, and they only notified 3 tribes. In the state of Nevada, there are 28 tribes. They took it upon themselves to only notify 3 tribes. Now that we have a Freedom of Information Act, we know that notification was only 1 letter. And in the past, tribes from around that area were talking about, hey, that place is important. There was a terrible massacre, 2 massacres up there in this area. And it's a sacred space, and we want to keep that sacred and keep it left alone. And so during that time of the NEPA process, the NEPA went 9 months, and then they closed it. And the record of decision was signed on January 21st, 2021. And that's when all the regional tribes started to find out, because it was kept very quiet. And this project is so big, 12,000 acres, going down 400 feet. This is hard rock mining according to the 1872 General Mining Act, and so large and big. And the annihilation of medicines, our Paiute and Shoshone medicines, annihilation of habitat. This is some of the last old growth sagebrush with a very important sage grouse, lek areas. All mule deer goes through. Antelope goes through. We collect important medicines out there. People perform ceremonies out there. This is an important place, and there was no tribal consultation with any of the tribes. And that's what's important, why we're trying to protect this area, that this place is a traditional cultural property. It has meaning to the Paiute and Shoshone people. It is although it is not formally designated a traditional cultural district or a traditional cultural property, it does have all the elements, because it is built into the roots of our community, of our heritage, and our culture. So I want to talk a little bit about what happened out there during the environmental impact statement. That really should have been a 4-year process. As you know, my fellow TIPOs and my fellow cultural resource managers out there, these projects that are that big are important to really do a very thorough environmental impact statement. That did not happen here. In 2021, when the record of decision was signed, the record of decision, the cultural resource inventory, the environmental impact statement, the historic properties treatment plan, the memorandum of agreement, all of those guiding permitting documents were do not talk about the massacre. I want to talk about 2 massacres that on September 12th, 1865, here, the United States Cavalry, the Nevada Cavalry was coming here after the Civil War and trying to take care of the native problem out here. Settlers were calling in the cavalry, lying to the cavalry and the government that our ancestors were attacking and terrorizing them, which is fully untrue. So on September 12th, 1865, a Captain Payne of the United States Nevada Cavalry came and attacked a small village out there that we know that there was 31 to about 70 people camping. The cavalry camped about 2-3 miles away, and in their notes, in their journal notes, which BLM has these notes in their own offices, the cavalry notes stated that, oh, we can see the campfires and we'll attack early in the dawn. And they did just that. They attacked early in the morning. They surprised our ancestors. People came out of their houses and began to fight the cavalry, and I don't want to say it a battle, because you know that they always say it's a battle. This was a massacre, and our people came out and ran, and a lot of people died. There was a lot of survivors, and one of the cavalrymen that was a part of the cavalry took a couple of the Indian babies. Those Indian babies were raised in the white world, but came back to the tribe. We have several writings about the September 12th, 1865 massacre, and those are 2 weeks after the massacre. Like on September 23rd, 1865, newspapers started to pick up this, that there was a battle and a massacre, and those were described in that area. And then we also have 3 years after the massacre, our people were 3 years after the massacre, a federal surveyor came and started to write in his journals. He's out there surveying for mapping, and he writes in his journal, which we have copies of, that this is where Captain Payne whipped a bunch of Indians, and there are skulls and bones to be laying around. And so we know our ancestors were out there and are part of the earth now. And why our people were not able to go back to rebury in our traditional manners was because the cavalry had posted men there, and people were, Paiute and Shoshone people were shot on site. So we also have, we do know through our oral histories of this massacre, in this area, we know where the cavalry was, we know where the cavalry were camped the night before, and we also know that this is one area where we also have other burials because of the mountain areas, and we also know that this, our people were always out there. We have medicines that we used during COVID that people were collecting. Our people still go out there today. I want to show you one of the areas where Lithium Nevada's corporation says that this is not a sacred area. It's an alleged sacred area, saying that the Paiute and Shoshone people are lying. And I want to show to you that this is what we call Sentinel Rock. We also we have other names for it as well. But right here is one of the main points that will be destroyed. And that scares us. We were just out there a few days ago. We had a fire going. We always go out there. We say our prayers. We're out there with the elders, with our language speakers, and so that we can still continue to make sure that our area is not sacrificed for the big lie of electric vehicles. So that's why we're fighting hard. We had a march on January 5th, 2023. Hundreds of people came from all over to support us. Back 2 years ago, a local rancher filed a lawsuit against BLM Winnemucca, as well as Lithium Nevada Corporation. So there was a rancher and 4 environmental organizations, the Reno Sparks Indian Colony and the Burns Paiute Tribe, but we're not giving up. We're still continuing to fight. I want to talk a little bit about how lithium will destroy the earth. You cannot mine your way out of a climate crisis. Right now, there are 16,000 lithium claims in the state of Nevada. Those claims are going to start coming to your guys' territories as well. We must stand and work and fight together, because we can no longer allow extractive corporations to take our water and to take all the resources that our ancestors relied on and that we rely on today. Although you could think electric vehicles will be good for the earth, they're really not. Lithium has to be mined to be put into the lithium battery. battery. And so that's why I'm saying the state of Nevada is on death row for mining. And when you mine hard rock mining, you know what that goes into. It's going to take hundreds and hundreds of thousands of gallons of water in one of the driest regions on earth here in the state of Nevada. 500,000 gallons of water is used to produce 1 ton of lithium. We don't have that here in the state of Nevada. We have been in a drought. We're one of the driest regions in the country. Billions in public subsidies, and according to the Inflation Reduction Act that President Biden just signed, billions of dollars are being sent to mining corporations and electric vehicle manufacturing companies to make sure that lithium is mined. Please know that mining lithium in the state of Nevada is wreaking havoc on our culture, and on our people and on our homelands and on the water. You water protectors and you land protectors, we may need you. For more information and to keep updated, our current information is on protectthakerpass.org. protectthakerpass.org. And please watch out, and we'll send through the National Association of TIPOs, we'll get information out to you guys all. Thank you. Have a really good conference. They're always really good. And good luck, and we fight the hard fight, and thank you.
Hello, Tribal Historic Preservation Officers. I can't see you, but you all look great, and I hope you're having a great conference. And so I will try to give sort of the legal and federal agency context for this project. I should say my name is Will Falk. I am an attorney. I represent the Reno Sparks Indian Colony and the Summit Lake Paiute Tribe in Section 106 consultation with the Bureau of Land Management, and specifically the Winnemucca District Office, Humboldt River Field Office. But I think that there probably are some underlying national strategies shared by the Bureau of Land Management, by the Forest Service, by the Army Corps of Engineers, by all of the federal agencies that are tasked with permitting these mines. I think that they do talk a lot, and I think their lawyers especially talk a lot, and I think that they try to push strategies that make it so they have to do as less work as possible and make it as less likely as possible that the tribes won't be too active in consultation and possibly slow down these projects. The Bureau of Land Management in the Thacker Pass campaign has used a really bad definition of consultation, I believe. So this is the Thacker Pass lithium mine is the biggest open pit lithium mine in the world. It would be the biggest lithium mine in the United States. And there were probably 15 or 20 tribes that attach religious or cultural significance to Thacker Pass. And yet BLM only originally identified 3 tribes as needing to be consulted. None of these 3 tribes had tribal historic preservation offices, by the way. So someone like Michon, who is a very experienced tribal historic preservation office, she was left out of the notifications for this project. And I think it most likely was because they knew that she would insist on a robust consultation process, and they didn't want to have to deal with that. But what BLM did in this case was they identified these 3 tribes, and they simply mailed a letter to the tribes. And about 5 or 6 days after mailing this letter without receiving a response, they reported to the Nevada State Historic Preservation Office that they had been consulting with these tribes for years before they sent this letter. And that the tribes had not presented any concerns about historic properties in the Thacker Pass vicinity. We've learned through the Nevada State Historic Preservation Officer, who has some statutory responsibilities to provide concurrence on different decisions made by BLM, and who can provide suggestions about how to perform better tribal consultation. We've learned that the BLM Nevada office in general has taken the position that they do not need to provide any sort of documentation or direct reference to tribal consultation to the Nevada SHPO. So in the Thacker Pass example, when the three tribes, when BLM told the Nevada SHPO that they've been consulting for years with these three tribes, when the Nevada SHPO asks, okay, well, can we see the documentation, or not the documentation of specific locations, but just did this, when did this consultation happen? Where did it happen? Who was there? And generally, what concerns did they notify? BLM Nevada appears to be taking the position that they will not provide that information to the Nevada SHPO. So the Nevada SHPO is left to provide concurrence without this supporting documentation, without knowing whether what BLM reported actually happened. Now, BLM in the Thacker Pass project never picked up a phone to call a tribal office or a tribal council member, didn't send any follow-up emails after sending a letter. And in fact, after they sent the first letter, COVID-19 hit, and BLM apparently sent a couple more letters to those three tribes over the course of the next year. They did fast track this project, so it all happened in less than a year. That's one of the main ways that they can cut down on consultation, is by doing these projects at warp speed and not giving tribes enough time to analyze the documents, the cultural resource inventories, those kinds of things. But that's what happened. Or here, COVID hit, and they still didn't try to call anyone or email anyone. They just sent letters. And in documents like the draft environmental impact statement and the final environmental impact statement, they again said that they had been consulting with the tribes for several years. They didn't say that they sent letters to the tribes and didn't get a response. They simply said that consultation had happened and there were no concerns presented. We also found that BLM overlooked documentation of a massacre at the hands of federal cavalrymen of Paiute people in Thacker Pass. Those documents BLM possessed in their own general land office records. And it wasn't until we had already sued BLM and we were looking through their records that we found this documentation of the massacre. So BLM had documents of the massacre, had the records of it, and they didn't report that in any of the public facing documents, the environmental impact statement, the record of decision. Possibly because they never actually found it, possibly because they recognized the controversy that would surround it, and hoped that no one would find those documents. They just, consultation to at least the BLM in Nevada simply means an attempt to notify a tribe of a project. It's not actually a two-way conversation. They will try to withhold documentation of tribal consultation from other tribes and from people that need concurrences, and they often don't actually do what they say they're going to do, or what their handbooks and manuals say is required of them. Yeah, I think it's, it's one of the last things I want to leave you all with is the Thacker Pass lithium mine project is a project for lithium for electric car batteries. We all know that climate change is terrible and that we need to fight it. But I don't think that destroying more of native culture is the right way to do it. I don't believe that destroying more of the land is actually going to save the land, and that we need to have some conversations about reducing our consumption before we go and destroy what's left of native land. But I think both political parties are going to be very enamored with the idea of forcing these projects through. I think from the Republican perspective, there's a lot of big business money to be made by this so-called green energy revolution. from the Democratic perspective, there's also a lot of money to be made, but there's also this sort of climate change fighting thing. So, you know, I would imagine that many of you live in areas where this next wave of extraction is coming. They're going to try and bill it as green. And then they will act like you're somehow getting in the way by insisting that they actually consult with you before they destroy your sacred sites.